Mick Jagger, the Rolling Stones leader, sentenced to jail a month ago on drugs charges, is free. Earlier today, he won his appeal against the prison sentence, and tonight he flew by helicopter to an outside broadcast location 30 miles from London to appear in World in Action. Publicity since the case has shown up a split between the society which resents the anarchy of people like the Stones and that which favours greater individual freedom. Tonight, World in Action examines the reasons for this split. With Mick Jagger are William Rees-Mogg, editor of the Times newspaper, Father Thomas Corbishley, a leading British Jesuit, Lord Stow-Hill, formerly Sir Frank Soskice, who has been Home Secretary and Attorney General, and Dr. John Robinson, Bishop of Woolwich and author of the controversial reassessment of Christianity, Honest to God. Mick Jagger has been silent for 3 months. He's read of people saying he's got what's coming to him, of a poll of young people in which 85% said his offence deserved a jail sentence, and he read the Times asking, who breaks a butterfly on a wheel?
Ladies and gentlemen, could I just ask you, take your pictures as speedily as possible. Don't think we've been unreasonable by asking Mr. Jagger...
Earlier today, Mick Jagger talked briefly to a press conference after the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Parker, had quashed his 3 months prison sentence for possessing amphetamine tablets and substituted a 12 months conditional discharge. Lord Parker told Jagger, if you keep out of any trouble for the next 12 months, what has happened will not be on your record as a conviction. If you do commit another offence, you will not only be punished for that offence, but brought back and punished for this one. Lord Parker also said that whether he liked it or not, Jagger was the idol of a large number of young people. He had grave responsibilities, and if he committed a further offence, should expect a higher penalty because of his responsibilities. Keith Richard, the other Rolling Stone convicted with Jagger, left the appeal court free. The court quashed his conviction of permitting his house to be used for the smoking of hemp.
And one more happy one for me. That's it.
OK, gentlemen, can we call it a day?
Yeah. As an idol of many young people in this country today, you have a very grave responsibility.
It's a grave use. I don't remember.
How do you propose to
exercise
that now?
Well, that's very difficult. And one perhaps doesn't ask for responsibilities. Perhaps one is given responsibilities when one is pushed into the limelight in this particular sphere rather than asking to be. And asked to be pushed into this, and in a way merely asked to be my private life to be left alone, so as it were. My responsibilities, as far as that goes, are only to myself. You know, in the public sector, such as to do with my work, my records, and etc. I have a responsibility, but in my private, the amount of baths I take or my personal habits are of no consequence to anyone else, I don't think.
Do you mean that you were picked upon because you are who you are?
I don't think we were picked upon in that way, but it's just that applies to everybody. The responsibility only applies to us because who we are.
A chance probably to talk to.
Are you going to make a film?
Can you just
I don't propagate religious views such as some pop stars do. I don't propagate drug views such as some pop stars do. This whole sort of thing was pushed upon me.
By whom?
By the mere fact I've been prosecuted, and also with Keith being prosecuted. We didn't make a public statement on religion, on drugs, or anything like that.
Gentlemen, can I interrupt? No, if it continues on that sphere, then I'll have to cut it. And that's it.
Can I put this
is that wrong?
I don't think this is necessary.
Do you know whether this will affect you on trips to America?
Well, the actual, as it stands now, it won't at all, no.
Because it's a conviction for 12 months.
No conviction at all.
No conviction.
No conviction.
There is no conviction.
No conviction.
No, you're wrong. It's conditional discharge, and the terming, I think I'm correct, that no entry will be made if Mick is of good behaviour after 12 months.
He had been,
but it is in fact a conviction.
Absolutely not.
No, it is not a conviction, I don't think.
Yes?
Yes, there's a lawyer there.
After the press conference, World in Action took Jagger by helicopter to the quiet location he asked for. There he talked about his attitude to the society he lives in with some of the people responsible for it.
Mick, you've had a difficult day and you've had a difficult 3 months, to put it mildly. And now you're sitting in this garden with a bench full, or a garden seat full, of the establishment opposite you. Rather like a Beerbohm cartoon. And you obviously have a power to communicate to very large numbers of people, young people in Britain, United States as well, which we don't have. And therefore, what we'd like to do would be to discuss with you the things that you believe in and think are important, and see what we feel about them. You're often taken as a sort of symbol of rebellion, and mothers deplore the influence of the Rolling Stones because they think that the Rolling Stones are rebellious. Do you think that the society that you live in is one you ought to rebel against, or do you think you're rebelling against it?
Yes, definitely rebelling against it. I mean, not in the obvious way that a newspaper or pop sort of headline would do it, but obviously we feel there are things wrong with society, but I haven't until very recently been into this kind of discussion at all, because I haven't really felt it's been my place, or through my knowledge, which I don't think is enough, to start pontificating on these kind of subjects. I've tried to keep out of discussions on religion, such as some pop stars trying to set a good example to teenagers by being religious, or others will try and set an example by saying, you should take this kind of, I've taken these drugs or these drugs, They're trying to keep out of that. But one finds oneself, society, more or less, has pushed one into this position, never asked to be pushed into it. And Lord Parker today said you have a great responsibility. It's a responsibility which has been so much pushed upon us, rather, the influence that we have has been pushed upon us, especially doing this drug thing. Was once asked to make certain pronouncements on it, where this is really, all this kind of thing is really part of one's private life, Before this, I didn't really want to talk about it.
One invariably gets drawn into controversy, Mr. Jagger, doesn't it? What I'd like to ask you really is this. You appeal to millions of young people. You give them pleasure, they enjoy your art. How do you conceive yourself as an influence with them? What is, the word a message is rather an overworked word, but in your personality, in your approach to music and rhythm and so on, what is the way in which you would like yourself to be understood amongst young people particularly?
Well, just in the very way that I started myself, when I was quite young.
Yeah.
Which is just to have as good a time as possible, which most young people do try and do, without any regard to responsibilities of any sort, social, family or others, because they tend to have very few at that age. I suppose as you get a little bit older, you start perhaps assuming some of these responsibilities to society. When you're very young, say 16, 17, you don't want anything to do with responsibility to society. You want to get on. One has just one's own very small life within a sort of teenage group. And you don't want to care about everything that everyone else does is wrong, and you know it. But of course, you're not always right. But that's all you want to do. And this is the main thing, is to start off with, was just have as good a time as possible.
But could we go back to this thing about society? Do you think society today is more corrupt than it was, or do you think society is always loudly corrupt and we have a duty to rebel against it? Or?
Yes, I think it's always been in need of checking the corruption. I don't know what kind of corruption they're talking about exactly here, but...
Well, this is what I'd like to know.
But today one's faced with a very different situation than in past centuries, perhaps, because of communication, for instance, which is none of us could have had the communication this in any other century that we have, instant communication, such as we're doing now. And this influences far more people. And with the small education, even that one is allowed today freely, this also affects this, which makes this generation and all these post-war thing and the money and everything else very different to the others. And also this generation has had there was no America to go to, such as in the last century. If you really didn't like it here, you could go to America, you know, start afresh. And then there's nothing. One's parents have been through 2 wars and a depression, and we've been through none of this. We don't even, it's all in history to us. We haven't been influenced by it, only as far as our parents could influence us by it. And politicians and other people are still very much largely influenced by these very great events in their past life, whereas this generation aren't interested in them. Perhaps they should be a little more, but haven't been influenced by them. So it's very different.
This mass communication thing you've just brought up, this is going to make the responsibility of the young all the greater, isn't it?
The responsibility of the old, actually, because they're the ones that are in charge of the mass communication media. Politicians are the ones that are really the ones that are putting over the messages more than anyone else. It's politicians that are putting over a message all the time through all the mass media throughout the world.
But you're reacting against this, and you're, in fact, producing an effect which counteracts that of the politicians and the rest of them.
Well, one would try to do that.
This is good.
What are the people trying to do our best?
Yes, I'm sure you do try and do your best. But the thing is, as I was saying, that this best is very well, but it may be very well for a generation that of your generation, right? It isn't obviously good enough for other people. This is what I'm trying to say.
What are the qualities you think that your generation is going to bring forward? Because quite soon, after all, it's going to be the dominant generation.
Yes, well, this is the formulation of I don't really want to formulate a new code of living or code of morals or anything like that. Or nor does, I don't think anyone of this generation wants to. One really has to see that for the first thing is that the open rebellions, not so much in this country as in others, such as America, which are the race riots, for instance. I mean, the race riots in America are not totally on race, you know. This would include a large section of young people in America. These are people that are the worst ones, the worst treated. This is where it will start, here. But there are lots of other people, especially on the west coast of America, who disagree, but perhaps aren't as badly treated or are much better off. But there's a basic thing between them all. It's not just a colour thing. It's against the whole system, which the system to those people which has done them no good at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't be looting and burning.
Well, see, I have an immense sympathy with this, and I also have sympathy with you being forced into this position to take up a sort of position, have a code, have a theory about it all, which I mean, is precisely the thing which you want to break through.
Yes, we don't want to.
On the other hand, it does seem to me one is inevitably thrust, and very rapidly thrust, up against the situation. You mentioned the race riots.
Yes.
Clearly, I mean, there are all kinds of sort of ugly and dangerous aspects to this, which you get into very rapidly.
Yes.
And this is the problem, isn't it? When you go for freedom, I mean, you are immediately up against what are the sort of definitions of freedom and limits of freedom.
Yes. Well, this has to be achieved. But, I mean, most of any leaders of this kind of freedom movement have been very negative in their approach, I think, because, like Leary, for instance, because they felt it's the logical first step to being negative. In other words, you know, drop out.
I mean, you wouldn't really go with Tim
But
Leary.
I wouldn't, and I'm sure he wouldn't go, as to say that was the final answer. That's just his sort of start to it. And I think perhaps that negative start, a very simple one which everyone can understand, is perhaps a start. I'm sure he wouldn't go to say that was the last word. But to formulate something new, I haven't formulated anything.
Yeah. Well, I sympathise very much.
But you could only be against something in virtue of something more positive. You're against it because you reject it, but you reject it in terms of something which you believe in.
Something else, yes, but there's certain aspects of it which one doesn't perhaps mind so much. But some of the things, it appears, both in America and Western Europe, that the freedom of the individual is being slowly curtailed. The freedom of this communication has become faster. The freedom of being in control or having anything to do with one of these forms of communication, these seem slowly to be disappearing. In this country, it seems to be working towards complete state monopoly of radio and television. Perhaps not controlled by the government, certainly in some sort of...
But isn't the problem today that as a result largely of these communications, the quicker our freedoms touch other people's freedoms, our lives touch other people's lives, and therefore we are immediately, much more quickly, up against this question of the limits of freedom without, in fact, creating chaos or danger.
No, I don't think it's got anything to do with it. I don't think individual freedom is affected by mass communication in that way at all.
No, but I mean, I sympathise with you in the way in which this is clamped down on, and I would be very strong that the law, the function of the law, is precisely to protect freedom rather than prohibit and suppress freedom, and we're very quickly, I agree, getting into a position where the law is instinctively thought of as against freedom rather than for freedom.
Well, it is,
and
of course. I mean, it's a fallacious
is,
argument to say that the law is for freedom, really.
But you would say
especially in lots
sense.
I mean, in cases against, in obvious cases against the individual wronging society, such as hitting an old lady over the head or something. This is obvious.
Well, I mean, you would not dissent, would you, from the view that, after all, the law tries to intervene between people in order to protect their individual sphere of freedom?
No, I'd say that
one person doing harm to another, to prevent one person trespassing on another's sphere of free action. Do you really? Is it really freedom that you would seek to promote, or a kind of, shall I say, intensity of living? I mean, you have the two are not very far apart in a sense, are they? Your appeal to the many people who enjoy your presence, is it really an appeal to develop themselves, to live fully, to live freely in that sense, without trespassing on other person's freedom, and without doing harm to other people?
They should never trespass on other people's freedoms. But quite often the law seems to work in the way of protecting a minority of interests, or to protect an interest which one would think was rather empty. I can, for instance, there was a time when attempting to commit suicide was a criminal offence.
It's changed.
And which was changed, but it's not very long ago it was changed. And lots of things like this, the law on homosexuality, the crime, no longer been changed. And in the same way as those two things, one can see someone who takes a drug which is very bad drug, such as heroin or something, a crime against himself, not a crime against society. I can't see how that is a crime against society. It's any more than jumping out of a window. It's a crime against society. It may cause other people inconvenience if someone jumps out of a window and lands on someone else. But I mean, it doesn't. It's not really a crime against society. And for one to say that society wants these people to be put away, but I can't see the point in putting them away for 6 months in a prison.
Society is made up of individuals. You know, we mustn't think of society as over against individuals.
Oh no, it is made up of individuals. Who are these people that demand that these people should be put in this particular place? This is something which the law has formulated.
Yes, but the law changes, doesn't it?
It changes. Yes, it does change, but it takes all these things that we're having to go through and all these other things to try and change it.
But isn't it right? Isn't it a?
And it's also obvious now.
But would you, for instance, go as far as the Americans in having complete freedom, or almost complete freedom, for people to possess firearms?
Oh, no.
Well, now, this seems to me a parallel thing. I mean, you've got to give a person the freedom ultimately to destroy himself, destroy other people. Now,
you can't compare firearms and heroin.
Well, no, but I mean, this may be a slower way of destroying yourself or destroying other people. But I mean, I do think that, and surely the real interest the law has here, as I see it, is not in simply suppressing freedom, but in protecting individuals against those who would exploit and abuse this freedom. Now, there are only too many people on the black market and so on who are prepared to exploit this.
Yes. Now,
this seems to be something that we ought to try and protect people against, whether it's drugs or anything else.
Yes.
Where would you draw the line where freedom ends and some prohibition begins? I mean, if you don't believe in complete and absolute freedom to do anything that you like, at some point there must be a limit to the freedom which you yourself advocate. Where would you put it? I mean, where it begins to hurt other people, where
yes, I mean, a real crime against society perhaps should be punished by the society, but this should be punished in the way to suit the case. And they must really be crimes against society, not just fears of society, which perhaps could be groundless.
But isn't it the case that when the law is seen to impose unreasonable prohibitions, then public opinion points that out through the press and Parliament, and in due course the law is changed?
Well, that's how it's supposed to work, I agree.
Doesn't it work like that?
But it does, in some cases, work like that. But and because of opposition from various of these people, perhaps it might be opposed by the newspapers. Perhaps it might be opposed by Parliament and not opposed by the newspapers. I mean, why should the newspapers have this power? Because I feel that when we're talking about personal responsibility, that the newspapers have this responsibility, perhaps even more than any individual, and they tend not to use it quite often.
Well, people's opinions differ, don't they? I mean, and they find the differences find expression in the press, and it is only by the general, as it were, public debate that society arrives at a conclusion that a particular law fits or doesn't fit and wants changing. Don't you accept that?
No, I accept that, yes. I wouldn't accept that you've sort of given a textbook definition of how the English Constitution works. I mean, it really doesn't work like that. I don't think we can.
But it does work by, as you would say, by a great deal of protest. And I should
yes, but the protest first of all, is very difficult to do. This is protesting. They've been protesting for years in America by peaceful means. Yeah. Coloured people have been protesting by peaceful means, and really, if it had got them anywhere, there wouldn't be any riots.
Do you feel your protests have got anywhere? Do you feel that you make progress, that you change society, or that society is
I'm not a keen protester at all. I'm very happy inside myself. I don't go marching and everything like that. But I feel that there are certain things, and that the outlets for protesting about them, there's a very large section of the public who disagrees with certain things, yet it's just not enough. And this is what happened in Detroit, walking around saying we're living in ghettos, just for years and years and years, marching from here to there. It just wasn't enough, obviously, for these people. Just couldn't get anything done. They're still living in ghettos, and so they burned them down.
But, I mean, it's a little hard, I should have thought, isn't it, to say that progress in a broad sense in adapting the law and changing it and making it more up-to-date hasn't taken place on a very vast scale. And that is the great merit of a free society, that we discuss our problems in public, we don't break each other's plates, and we come to conclusions which then Parliament translates into a change in the law. And you, in your art and your personality, in a sense, you would wish to be thought as taking part in the broad protest, the broad movement towards the change of ideas. Would that not be right? Or?
Yes, that's right. But I don't like the way that these normal channels just don't interest me at all, because they don't seem to solve. We're talking about problems, and sometimes we're getting into details, but by and large, politics and politicians throughout history just seem to get bogged down. By the time they have fantastic ideas when they're 25, or enter Parliament when they're 30. They get drawn into the whole system, and it might end up on the backbenches.
Oh, but I think it's a little unfair to politicians.
I don't think it's unfair at all, because they seem to achieve very little, and the solutions to these fantastic problems
seem quite easy. I agree that it takes time for these things to achieve, but when you think of the history of legislation in this country over the last 150 years or so, I mean, the time when people were hanged for stealing sheep, abolition of slavery, all these things, I mean, they have, you know,
produced... It's being done, certainly, but I mean, just the thing of slavery in the first place...
You feel it's not being done quickly enough?
Well, I don't... Those things, those domestic things, such as you've just mentioned, that may well be true, but as far as the problems of the world are concerned, you really believe that the politicians of the world are doing very well at solving them.
I think you've got to have a tremendous head of steam constantly underneath from the bottom to get anything changed.
I mean, you've got these...
to work away with... But I mean, I do think it's worth mentioning here the fact we're all here today. I mean, very largely, I would say, depends on the protest that's come from the very top, from the editor of the Times, and the courage to risk prosecution by making comment while the thing was sub judice. Now, this seems to me a very courageous act of protest, which I think has let go a tremendous amount, which is creative in the last few weeks, so that, I mean, this hasn't been a totally negative thing. And I think
I'm very happy today because...